She never expected a simple elevator ride to change her life forever. The door slid open with a soft chime, and as she stepped inside, she felt the usual chill of indifference that hung in the corporate tower. Clutching her worn-out handbag, she tried to blend into the glossy world of high heels and tailored suits. But before the elevator reached the top floor, something happened that would burn in her memory forever. A group of executives stood nearby, their laughter sharp and careless. They barely looked at her until one of them smirked and whispered something that made the others snicker. Their eyes swept over her like she didn't belong, like she was invisible in their world of power and wealth. She kept her head down, her heart pounding, every word cutting deeper than the last. That short ride felt like an eternity, a silent reminder of how cruel people could be. When they thought you had nothing, what they didn't know was that life had taught her how to turn pain into strength. She stepped out of the elevator that day with fire in her veins and a decision that would change everything. They thought she was just another face in the crowd. They thought they could laugh and forget. But she wasn't going to let this moment define her. She was about to make sure they never forgot her name. What happened next would shock the entire building. Within weeks, whispers started spreading in boardrooms. A new investor was making bold moves, buying up shares, changing the game from the inside. And when the truth came out, it left everyone speechless. The woman they had mocked in that elevator. She now owned the company. But that was only the beginning. She wasn't always powerful. Just months before that elevator ride, she was working long hours at a small firm, doing everything she could to keep her life together. Her clothes weren't designer and her shoes weren't polished. But she had something none of those executives had: a relentless drive to rise above every failure life had thrown her way. She had grown up knowing what it meant to fight for survival, and those struggles became her strength. That day in the elevator wasn't the first time she felt out of place. But it was the first time she realized how quickly people judged without knowing the story behind a face. Their mocking laughter replayed in her mind like an endless loop. It didn't just hurt, it fueled her. She walked out of that building with one thought: they would never see her the same way again. What no one knew was that she had been planning something big for years. Late nights, countless sacrifices, learning every detail about the corporate world she once admired from a distance. While they were busy looking down on her, she was quietly climbing one smart move at a time. And when the opportunity finally came, she didn't hesitate. Whispers in the stock market. Sudden changes in board meetings. Nobody could figure out who was behind the aggressive buyouts. Names were being tossed around, rumors spread like wildfire, but her name was never on the list. She made sure of that. Every deal was calculated. Every investment carefully hidden by the time the truth was ready to surface. The company that once looked untouchable was already in her hands. But this wasn't just about revenge, it was about rewriting her story. And what she did next would shock even the people who thought they knew power. The day the news broke, the entire building buzzed like a hive struck by a stone. Her name appeared on the official documents, and within hours, everyone knew the truth. The quiet woman they had brushed off in the elevator was now their boss. Shock turned into whispers. Whispers turned into panic. Phones rang nonstop as executives scrambled to make sense of what just happened. Some called it impossible, others called it genius. But behind the polished walls and glass offices, fear was setting in. She walked back into the company, not as an outsider, but as the new owner. And the looks on their faces were priceless. The same men who laughed that day now stood with stiff smiles, pretending they didn't remember. But she remembered every word, every smirk, every dismissive glance. And though she carried herself with grace, her silence said more than any speech could. Still, power wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. Taking over the company meant stepping into a world full of secrets and enemies. The previous CEO wasn't ready to give up without a fight. Behind closed doors, alliances were forming. Plans were being whispered in dark corners. Some wanted to force her out. Others wanted to use her for their own gain. And in the middle of it all, she had to stay 3 steps ahead because one wrong move could destroy everything she had built. At the same time, her personal life began to collide with her new reality. Old friends resurfaced, some out of genuine care, others chasing the shadow of her success. Even her own family started questioning her choices. Unaware of the storm she was walking into, she thought buying the company was the end of her struggle. But it was only the beginning of a game where trust could cost her everything, and betrayal was waiting just around the corner. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a battlefield disguised as boardrooms. Every meeting was a test, every handshake a trap. The former CEO, now stripped of his title, but not his influence, was quietly rallying those loyal to him. She could sense it, the sideways glances, the hushed conversations when she entered a room. Something big was coming, and it wasn't going to be friendly. One evening, as the city lights glimmered outside her office window, an anonymous email arrived. No subject line, no signature, just one chilling sentence. "You don't belong." Here, her fingers trembled slightly as she closed the laptop. For a moment, the weight of everything pressed down on her chest. But fear wasn't an option. She had climbed too high to fall now. The tension escalated when a leaked report hit the media, accusing her of illegal trading. The story spread like wildfire, and suddenly the woman everyone admired was being dragged into a storm of scandal. Investors started pulling out, stock prices dipped, and the board demanded answers. She sat in that boardroom, calm on the outside, but inside, her mind raced. She knew the leak wasn't an accident, it was a move. A deliberate strike meant to break her. At the same time, a personal betrayal cut even deeper. Someone close to her, someone she trusted, was feeding information to the enemy. But who? The walls around her felt like they were closing in, every smile masking a possible lie. And then came the final blow. An emergency meeting was called late at night. The former CEO was waiting there, papers in hand, a smug grin on his face. The board was ready to vote, and everything she fought for was hanging by a thread. What happened in that room would decide everything. The room was silent, except for the shuffle of papers, as the former CEO slid the documents across the polished table. His voice was smooth, almost smug, as he announced that he had enough votes to force her out. It seemed like checkmating till her phone buzzed. One glance at the screen changed everything. She stood slowly, her calmness unsettling everyone. "You think you've won?" she said softly, her eyes fixed on him. "You have no idea what's about to happen." Before anyone could respond, the double doors burst open and 2 men in tailored suits entered, carrying files marked confidential. Gasps filled the room as they revealed the twist. A government investigation was underway, but not into her. The former CEO and several board members were being probed for years of financial fraud. Evidence, witnesses, and signed statements all laid out on the table. The man who had just been ready to humiliate her was suddenly pale, his confidence draining as fast as the color from his face. But the real shock wasn't that she exposed them. It was that she wasn't alone. Mysterious investor, someone no one had even heard of, had been backing her from the shadows. This wasn't a rescue. It was a calculated move in a much bigger game. The board members exchanged nervous looks, realizing the company wasn't just facing a leadership change. It was on the brink of a takeover that could wipe them all out. And then came the final blow of the night. She dropped a folder on the table, revealing documents that hinted at a secret merger worth billions. If it went through, everything would change, not just for the company, but for the entire industry. But what they didn't know was that the deal came with a dangerous cost. and she was about to find out just how high that price would be. The tension in the room was unbearable as eyes darted between the damning evidence and her calm, steady gaze. The former CEO tried to speak, but his voice cracked under the weight of what was unfolding. The board, sensing the tide had turned, began to shift their loyalty. In one swift motion, they voted him out permanently, stripping him of all authority. It was a crushing fall from power, and for the first time, silence replaced his arrogance. She had done it. Against every odd, every whisper of doubt, she now held full control. The government officials confirmed the investigation would move forward, and the guilty parties were escorted out in shame. Relief washed over her for a brief second till the next move came into play. As the room emptied, the mysterious investor finally revealed himself. He was calm, confident, and far too familiar with the company's inner workings. She realized with a sinking feeling that his help hadn't been charitied, was leverage. The secret merger she had planned was no longer hers alone. The investor had maneuvered everything to position himself as an equal partner, demanding half of the empire she fought so hard to build. For a moment, her victory tasted bitter. She had won the battle, but the war had changed its shape. With a firm voice, she agreed to the terms, but deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of another game, one where trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. As she left the building that night, city lights reflecting in the glass walls, her phone buzzed again. A single message flashed across the screen. "Next move is yours." And she understood one thing: power wasn't given, it was borrowed. And someone would always come to collect. The city was quiet that night as she drove home, the weight of her choices sitting heavy on her shoulders. In the rearview mirror, the towering building faded into the distance, a symbol of everything she had fought for, and everything it had cost her. The mysterious investor's message echoed in her mind, a reminder that power always comes with a price. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. For the first time in months, there was no boardroom chaos, no scheming rivals, no whispers in dark corners. She had one, but not in the way she imagined. The company was hers, yet she had traded part of it to keep the empire alive. It wasn't just a business move, it was survival in a world where loyalty is rare and betrayal is currency. As her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, she scrolled past them and opened an old photo of herself from years ago, the woman standing in the elevator, clutching that worn-out handbag, invisible to everyone around her. She smiled faintly. That woman was gone, but her resilience remained. The former CEO and his allies faced justice. The investigation cleared her name, and the scandal slowly faded from headlines. Employees who once doubted her now admired her strength, and the company's future looked brighter than ever. Yet, she knew the fight wasn't truly over. In business, the game never ends, it only changes players. She leaned back, breathing in the silence, and whispered to herself, "Never underestimate the quiet ones." Because she understood now, true power isn't about the money, the title, or the building with glass walls. It's about courage, the courage to rise when everyone expects you to fall. And with that, her story began again.